The silver lining of the past 2 years is that our quilting community has become international. Through Zoom, YouTube, and Instagram, we can find and interact with quilters from around the globe. Today's guest, Amira Ameruddin, lives in Malaysia. She discovered quilting while studying abroad, and she is now a pattern designer and accomplished free motion quilter on her domestic sewing machine. So grab your sewing and a cup of tea, and here's my interview with Amira Ameruddin. Welcome, Amira. I understand you are coming from just the southern part of Malaysia.
Thank you so much, Karen, for having me. I'm so excited to be here. I am in southern part of Malaysia, close to Singapore.
Now, you first got on my radar many years ago, and I believe you were in Australia at the time studying for a physics degree.
Yes, that's right. So I was in Australia in 2011. We moved from Malaysia to Australia. I had a little kid at the time. So me and my husband and my little one has moved to Australia for me to do my studies there for about 4 years. And that is actually where I found quilting.
So had you seen quilts before, or was it brand new?
So I have always been a maker. My mother and father are both crafters themselves. So they have taught me a lot of different crafts, and my mom taught me how to sew. I sew a lot of garments. So when I moved to Australia, I knew that I wanted to have a sewing machine. So when I was there, I think the first month in, I was already itching to get a new sewing machine because we didn't bring mine. And that was the first time I saw a handmade quilt in the quilting store. So I got into a quilting store. I can still imagine myself going into that first time. There was a lot of red quilts because it was close to Christmas. And I got my sewing machine. I saw bolts and bolts of beautiful fabric, cotton fabrics, and I just fell in love. At that moment, I knew I wanted to start quilting. So I got my machine, I got some fabrics, and I came back. I scoured the internet and looked at all the quilting tutorials, and I just started from there, and I've never turned back.
So have you ever taken a quilting class, or have you just totally self-taught?
So I was thinking of taking a quilting class at the beginning, but then I was on a really limited budget. I was on student allowances. So I had limited budget and I had limited time. So I had to spend all the weekdays at school studying, of course. That was the purpose of me being there. And I have little ones as well. So I feel bad like leaving him at that time for the weekend as well. So I taught myself a lot at the beginning.
So you returned to Malaysia with your stash of quilting fabrics. Is there a lot of supply of quilting cotton in Malaysia, or are you just working through your stash that you brought with you?
So when I came back in 2016. So about 4 years I was there. I was collecting quite a stash there. So we have brought all of them back, the one that I have, and I still have them in my stash. Some of them is not yet being used, but we do not have quilt stores here. So that is one of the things that I really missed. But we do have some craft stores, general craft stores that sell yarns and some fabrics that I can buy, but they're still expensive because they take into account as well the shipping cost and all that. But then I find that supporting them as well is actually important. Then they can actually buy more fabrics and I can have more choices that way. But these days I still buy from the US, although the shipping cost is actually quite a lot, just because of the limited selection that I have here. And I can't help myself, like the fabrics, it's just so beautiful, right? So I have some budgets that I put aside so that I can actually purchase from overseas, including the shipping. So usually the shipping cost is actually almost the same as much as the stash that I'm buying. So I have to think about that. That's one of the challenge here.
You mentioned that you buy things from the US, but I think that the US is buying so many things from Asia. You know, the cottons are made in Korea and Vietnam and China. Like there's so many garments are even made in Malaysia. Are you able to get a direct link to the fabrics, or do you always have to bring them in from the US?
Yeah, I've always thought about that as well. Most of the things are actually from Asia, right? But we are not able to access those because they are made for export use. So if I go to a local fabric store, I can get some cotton, but it's not a quilting cotton. So it'll be a bit different, but I do use some of them, especially in the backing. Some of them are a little bit cheaper, but they have like different grains. But I do still use them as well. It's just that I am yet to use them for the quilt top itself. I feel okay to use it on the back, but then I think it just works fine. It's just probably it has different shrinkage, I would say.
Yes.
Otherwise, it'd be fine. I think it's fine to actually mix up all different textures or different materials as well. I think back then, when we have not much cotton, back in the days, in the olden days, a lot of people actually use different materials, and then it was fine. It turns out
Yeah.
into a quilt anyway. So I think it's fine for us to use all what we have, which is great.
Is there a lot of silk in Malaysia?
Yes, there's a lot of silk. So we have batik, right? Those are from Indonesia, I think, because I have seen one shop from Indonesia that sells batik. So we can actually get access to that. In Malaysia, we do have cotton batik as well, but they don't make it for quilting. So they have really large features on them. And we also use them in like traditional clothes.
Where you are, you're just a little bit above the equator. Is there challenges to making quilts in that type of climate?
In terms of challenges, I wouldn't say that it's hard to actually work with a quilt, but you don't really want to kind of like cuddle in a quilt, doing hand quilting or sort of things, right? Because I remember in Australia when we were in winter, I like to do some hand quilting because I have the quilts on me and then I do some hand quilting. Over here, I don't think that's preferable. I haven't done any hand quilting here yet after being here for almost 5 years back here. So I do still make quilts on the sewing machine. That doesn't bother me as much.
Because of the climate as well, do you have to take special care in storing your fabrics and your quilts when they're done?
It is humid here, and I tend to find that it is a bit dustier here as compared to when I was in Australia. I guess the dust can stick to the surface easier because of the humidity. So what I do is actually I just use a lint roller to kind of clean up all my stash. I air it out so I don't have it in a plastic box. I have it displayed. So basically I just use a lint roller to kind of clean the dust away. In terms of mold or anything, I haven't seen any yet. So I'm glad that's not a problem here in Malaysia. Yeah.
Do you pre-wash your fabrics?
Ooh, that is a controversial question. I don't. I don't pre-wash my fabric, but these days, I followed Kimberly of Fat Quarter Shop, and she actually starched her fabrics. So I learned to starch the fabric, so that kind of pre-shrunk the fabric beforehand, and then I kind of just air it out to dry. So is that counted as washing?
No, it doesn't count as pre-washing. But I have noticed even like this quilt that I have behind me has just gotten more crinkly being out. Like we've had some rain and it's just naturally shrinking.
Oh, interesting. I've never really looked into that differences, whether my quilts are actually more crinkly here. But they are crinkly because I use all my quilts. I wash them. I have little kids. They make lots of spots on the quilts, and I don't really mind. I don't have any quilts that I don't use. So I have them out and about, and I wash them often.
So is the temperature the same all year round?
We don't have season. So that is another thing, right? So when people say they have a seasonal change, I kind of like try to imagine. Thankfully, I've been to Australia where there are seasons. So we are coming towards December where there is a lot of rains and we call it rainy season. Otherwise, it'll just be the same all year round. It's all summer and humid, but there's a lot of benefits to that as well. So I'm enjoying whatever I have.
Is quilting growing in Malaysia? Is that something that other people are taking on?
Since I'm actually on social media, I do see a couple of quilters in Malaysia, but I haven't been able to actually meet up with them since I just came back and then had busy years. And then I was just settled down, and then it's COVID, and then we didn't get to actually meet up. So I think there are a few that I already know from social media, but if it's growing, maybe because then you have social media, you have some people that you see that's from the same country, and maybe they start to get interest in that. And some has actually come to me in the DMs and trying to say that they would like to learn quilting. I would love to teach them if things were better with COVID as well. I would love to host a quilting class for people who are interested in the local place.
Well, this is one of the fascinating things about well, COVID, not necessarily COVID, but social media, because we're not in contact with each other. Social media is our way of contacting with each other. And just doing research on you, looking at your Instagram feed, but I also looked at who was following you and who commented. And there was this whole world of crafters in Malaysia that I had no clue. And just following these really interesting women and what they were doing and a different perspective, because they're in a different climate, a different world, different cities, different history coming to it. Really fascinating and lovely.
Thank you. Yeah, I have seen some of them, like most of them who don't really make large quilts because we don't really have the need to do it. So some of them actually worked on really small projects, but it's still a patchwork project. And I think it comes towards like we don't have really that much of access towards the things that we need to make the quilts, right? Battings. A lot of the crafters that comes to me, like from Malaysia themselves, they actually came to me and then asked me where to get these things. And wherever I can find and I can link them to local places, I would actually show them where to get them. But then there are things that you have to actually buy overseas, and then comes the costing of the shipping, which most people don't really like to spend on, which is understandable as well. Especially when you're starting a new hobby, right? You don't know whether you should invest in as much into the shipping costs as well.
You're a teacher, you're in the lab, you've got small children. When do you find time to quilt?
I don't really have time to quilt when they're around. So basically what I do is I try to find morning time. So wake up really early in the morning, I do my prayers and I have like some quiet time. And I go into my sewing room and I just start sewing from there before things get busy. So in those wee hour of the morning time, I think I can do a lot. And I love the fact that with patchwork, you don't have to do a lot of things. Like you can just move a little bit and it's already progressing. So that's what I love. I think that's why I keep this craft going, because I find that it's very different than when you have to sew a garment. You kind of want to actually get to the finish line really quickly. I mean, you can't sew a garment and leave it like for 2 years and then continue on it, because it probably wouldn't fit you, right? But a quilt can, right? You can have a work in progress for 5 years and it's still usable, it's still giftable, and that's what I love about quilting.
You got your degree in physics. How have you applied some of that analytical brain of yours to quilting?
Ooh, I don't think I've actually applied really the mathematical side or like the physics side, but I do look at things differently. I feel like I spend a lot of time in the lab looking at things under the microscope. So I see things differently than our naked eye sees, right? So when we see some things, we don't really see what is the structure inside it. But inside a microscope, you can see that these are actually made of really lovely structures that has formed some sort of patterns in there. And all those patterns actually affects their properties in terms of how we see it with our naked eye. So that's how I see quilts as well. We can see a cheetah quilt with the same pattern, exact half square triangle like the one you have in your background right now, right? So we can have a cheetah panel that look exactly like that. And from far away, it may look the same, but when we look at closely, you can admire the piecing that you had in the real quilt that you made, right? The piecing. And that's what I see as well. When I see things, I see it differently because I know under the microscope, it looks like there's a maker behind that, putting things like one by one and piece. It's just a way of seeing it differently.
You just participated in 100 days, 100 blocks with Angie and I. I loved your reel of sorting all your scraps at the end. That was quite fun. Have you participated in it before?
This is actually my first time, and it was so much fun that I have already anticipated to actually joining again next year. It was so much fun. So I finished all the 100 blocks. I am actually going to cut the sashing, but I bought the fabric. I bought tula pink from a local fabric store. But again, shopping online because even though she's local, but she's still far away from me. She's about 4 hours from my place. So I still have to buy online and I can't see the colors really. There's 2 different colors, but I'm not really sure which one should I get. And online, you really can't tell which one, right? So I think I got the wrong color, but I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure whether to actually just go on with it, but maybe I will. I have taken a picture of it and probably I'll post on Instagram.
Tula has some beautiful lines coming out.
So a Tula being fabric, one or two of the local stores, fabric stores, they do get Tula's fabric. I think it has a lot more interest towards crafters here in Malaysia because they don't just make quilts with them, they make bags. So bags are more popular here, I guess. So they can sell those fabrics. So they take them here, so I can get them locally.
Now, one thing that I noticed immediately on your blog is that you are a phenomenal free motion quilter. Were you immediately a free motion quilter? Did you say that that was your thing, or is that something that's developed over the years?
Oh, I wish I was. Like, you know, just the moment I got into quilting, I know how to free motion quilt. No, it didn't came that way. So I had a really bad experience at the beginning of my free motion quilting. So I came back from that store learning how to quilt, and I know how to actually piece, and I even got a batting for it. And then I'm like, oh, then how do I do this? At first, I was actually using just the normal foot to just get the straight line, but it was all puckering. And then I had to actually Google what's wrong with it. So I had to actually get a walking foot. And while I was Googling all the walking foot things, I saw that you can actually buy this free motion quilting foot for your domestic machine. I thought that was only possible with a long arm machine. So I bought them two together, and then I came back, and that's when I started. Like, I just learned from Angela Walters on YouTube at that time. I love her channel. She teach on Craftsy as well. At the beginning, I was learning a lot from Craftsy, and that's where it all started. It didn't start well. I had some couple of placemats which I made and used, which wasn't really that pretty, but I feel good because I actually used my practice piece. And that's what I encourage other people to use as well. Like, practice and then use it so that you don't feel like you're wasting, and you'll get better with more practice. So my first few quilts I gifted away. It was free motion quilted confidently with all the puckers at the back, with all the folds at the back, but no one really knew, right? So I did get better, and I learned a lot, of course, with a lot of practice. I learned a lot, and that's what I try to share as well on the blog, some of the things that I learned and my quilting journey. And I really love free motion quilting because it just gives you a little bit more space to kind of like be creative. Like, you have already your quilt top, but then you can actually add a little bit more just by doing different things.
Yes, it's funny how we put so much emphasis on the top and the finishing of it. There's so many more things you can do with the pattern. The pattern can add secondary designs. You can add color with the thread. You can add texture with the pattern. It's funny that we think of it so late. We don't think of it at the beginning when we're designing the quilt top.
That's right. So I usually think about quilting the design later on as well. After I finish the quilt top and all that, then I look at it and see what kind of patterns do I want to do it. Do I want to custom quilt it? And I'm glad that I actually went into learning free motion quilting, because when I came back here, I have the budget now to actually send out to professional quilters if there is any in Malaysia, but there's none. None to my knowledge. I mean, I haven't found it yet. So I can't send off my quilt top to someone to actually get it professional quilted. So I'm glad that I can actually do it myself. Like, I just take the time, because if I were to send it off, I probably have to send it off overseas. And that would means a lot of shipping costs and also time as well. Like, might as well I just do it myself slowly using my regular machine.
So you've learned all these skills and now you've put it into an online course. Tell me about your free motion online course.
Yes, so I have a free motion quilting course, which is free motion quilting bootcamp. So it started me teaching the basic tutorial on how to get started with free motion quilting. And that is actually free on the blog, where you can sign up and you have a 1 week free motion quilting kind of a beginner series where I teach you what tools you can actually buy. Because I think at the beginning, I was trying to not buy a lot of stuff because I don't know whether I really like doing this free motion quilting, right? But then when I got those tools, it has helped so much, like the glove, the Teflon sheet. It helped so much that my experience was a lot better when I had those tools. I wouldn't have liked free motion quilting if it was all the struggles, a lot of struggles. So I decided to actually teach that as a free course that's available on the blog. But I do have an extended version of that, which is Free Motion Quilting Bootcamp. And that's where I go into deeper for each of the design, and I talk as I actually do the things, and I also listed out some of the common things that mistakes that I guess that people would try to make at the beginning as you do different designs. Me myself, of course, made those mistakes, and that's why I wanted to share those things. And I feel like I love sharing. I'm a teacher by nature. Both of my parents are actually teachers, so basically it's a nature of me to actually teach, and I love to share, and that's why I actually created the course.
So you mentioned that your mother and father are crafters too. What kind of crafts do they do?
So my mother, she sews. So she sews a lot of home decor, and she sews clothing as well. And she has actually done patchwork, but not really a patchwork quilt. So she uses all the leftovers from the garments that she sews into a patchwork blanket. So she has all these leftovers, polyesters, leftovers, cottons, or whatever she's working on, and she patched it all into a blanket. And we used to actually fight over these blankets because they were all different textures, and we loved like touching all that as a kid, right? So she does that, and my father does a little bit of woodworking. So he does a little bit of furnitures around the house, and that has just inspired me to actually keep on making.
So speaking of your mom, has she been interested in quilting?
Oh, she has. So when I got into quilting, I got back to Malaysia. I actually gifted her one of the machine that I got secondhand in Australia. So it was a big craft machine, and she started quilting herself. So I'm so proud of her because she actually did the free motion quilting herself as well. She struggles with some of the beginning stage, I guess, but she tried, and she actually finished a whole big quilt with that. She likes to make scrap quilting. So she made a couple already, and yeah, she's interested as much as I do these days.
And have any of your friends caught on to quilting?
Well, I haven't been able to actually get anyone to actually get on the board with it. So a lot of people, I mean, I am obsessed with it, right? Some of them do come to my sewing space before COVID, and they're like they love the sewing space, but they're not interested in it. I mean, I haven't found the right person yet, but I've seen a lot on social media, and I can't wait to actually meet them in real life.
So you have 3 children.
2 boys and 1 girl. The little one is a girl.
So your 2 boys, have they shown any interest in quilting?
So my eldest one has actually shown a lot of interest in quilting, especially lately. He has been in my sewing room a lot of the time of his life, of course. He loved the puzzles bit, but nowadays he can actually piece by himself. So we had our Independence Day in August. So I had told him that maybe we can actually make a flag out of patchwork, right? We can have red pieces, white pieces, and you can piece them together. And he did really well. I didn't have to teach him how to chain piece. He was thinking about it himself. I think he's been watching me. So he's been piecing it himself. I have a reel on that in my Instagram as well. He was piecing the flag, and he made it himself. I just helped him with the applique part, and that was just like ironing it down. Otherwise, he's a very good quilter, I guess.
Excellent.
And he even mentioned in the reels, he said that I want to teach this to my children. I'm like, he's already thinking about his children. All right, we're going to be a generation of quilters.
That's lovely. That's a lovely story. So tell me about the quilt that's behind you.
So the one behind me is actually the double wedding ring quilt. So I made this, I think, within the last year I was in Australia, because it wasn't quilted then. So I had to actually pack it up as a quilt top, and I brought it back here and quilted it. And I was so ambitious with this quilt. It was a large quilt. It's a queen size. I love the piecing part because it's just a lot of chain piecing. And then when it comes to the quilting, I thought I would do a different design for each of these squares, right? Until I was out of ideas of what to quilt. So I quilted a lot of them with different design, and then at the end I was just so sick of it. I had a love and hate relationship with this quilt. But at the end, of course, I love it so much. At the end, a couple of those squares were just quilted the same, and I don't even notice that. I mean, like, why did I think in the first place that I wanted to do different design in each block? But then sometimes we do those things, right?
You're struggling and you have to go back and revisit that idea, that big idea. Like, really, why do they all have to be different? And will anybody even notice that they're, as you say, that they're all different?
So I think in the end, I learned a lot as I make more quilts. I learned that, sometimes you don't have to be that ambitious, more about getting it to the finish line and enjoying the process as well. Because sometimes when we are too ambitious, it becomes not enjoyable anymore. And you kind of like put it aside and not getting it done. And yes, just like the title of your YouTube channel, right? Just get it done. Quilts. So I think it's just really important to just sometimes ditch the idea and just move on.
So what is your favorite part of the process?
It depends on different time phase, I guess. So nowadays I love piecing just because I have little kids, and when they come into the sewing room, I don't like struggling with the large quilts on the machine. So I find that I've been putting off a little bit on the free motion quilting and getting it to the finish line. But I love the free motion quilting part, most of it. But these days, I think with little kids, I just find that piecing is a lot much easier for me to do, because I can just do a little bit and I can stop whenever they need me. Yeah, I guess it depends on the time phase.
Do you have your own sewing room?
I don't have my own sewing room at the moment. I have a sewing corner, so I share it with my kids' room. So the one that you see on Instagram, that's just half of it. So that's just half of it. I am extending the house. So currently there's a lot of construction in my house. So we are almost to the end. I will have a sewing room soon. So that sewing room will remain there. We thought about moving my sewing room out of that place and my kids can stay there. But my husband said, it's better to move the kids out there because your stuff is too much to move. So which is true. Which is so true. So I'm staying there.
The world over, we have the same problems, don't we?
Yes. There's just too much thing. I mean, like if I were to move, it'll be days.
So do you put a label on your quilt?
Yes, I do. I recently tried to put labels before I get it quilted. So this is also from Queen Girlie of Fat Quarter Shop. So she actually put her labels before she get it quilted. And I'm so inspired by that. I have actually made a lot of labels ready for me to actually just put it onto the back of the quilts and get it ready there. And I can just write the dates. So I actually have a course on quilt labels as well. So those one is actually for printable quilt labels. So you can design cute quilt labels and you can have them printed. So I have them printed a lot. So I have about 50 plus labels ready to go. And that has made it so much easier for me to put the labels on my quilt. And I went back to some of my old quilts as well and just applicate some of the quilt labels. I think it's important to quilt labels just because, especially in Malaysia, like I don't know where my quilts will end up being, right? And I just want that someone to know that the maker of the quilt is me. I don't know. I feel like that will tell a lot of stories and that will inspire from generation to generations as well.
Tell me about the name Little Mushroom Cap. That's how we find you on Instagram.
I was sewing in my bedroom at the corner of my bed, like really small, narrow space next to my bed, actually. So we have a table where I had all my computers. And then I have my sewing table right there. So I feel like I'm under the cap. And then it just makes sense for me at that time to actually call it Little Mushroom Cap. I don't know, but I just feel like that that name kind of catchy at the time.
If people want to get a hold of you, how do they find you?
So you can find me on my blog, of course, thelittlemushroomcap.com. If you want to go to links, you can just stroke /links behind it. And you can also find me on social media such as Instagram, Amira_LittleMushroomCap. And say hi to me.
Thank you so much for being on the show today, Amira. It's been lovely having you. I look forward to one day seeing you in person, whether it be in Malaysia or traveling someplace, somewhere we'll meet up.
Yes, I'll be looking forward to that as well, Karen. So if you ever come to Malaysia, please let me know.
I hope you enjoyed my interview with Amira Ameruddin. She did such an amazing job on her 100 Days, 100 Blocks quilt that you definitely want to check out her Instagram feed. If you are interested in either her free motion quilting bootcamp or her quilt label wizard class, she is offering a 20% discount to all my viewers. Just use the discount code JustGetItDoneQuilts. Next up on Karen's Quilt Circle is Jenny Smith, the author of Quilting with Liberty,
15 quilts celebrating 145 years of fabric.
So we have a ton to talk about and you don't want to miss it, so be sure to subscribe.
And don't forget to check out my holiday gift guide for 2021.
Next time you're in your sewing space, be sure to have Karen's Quilt Circle playing on in the background. I have interviewed so many amazing quilters. Let one inspire you.